Hey everyone, this is my weekly update. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet. I'm still kind of working through that. I was thinking about like this week in parenting or this week in parents or families or I have my coffee here, so maybe like coffee with Dr. B or something. I don't really like referring to myself as Dr. B, so I can't see that being the case, but if you have an idea, I would love for you to comment below and share an idea for what we could call this. I'm basically going to try and round off the week with everything that I have learned and done and talked about and been asked about across not just coronavirus. Like right now, it's all a lot of it is coronavirus, but we'll talk about other things with parenting and everything else. But I wanted to first update a couple of things. One, last week on my kind of first episode of This Week in Parenting, or This Week with Parents, or whatever you want to call it, we talked about Kawasaki's disease, the what that actually looks like, and then what this multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children related to coronavirus, which is MIS-C, and then somewhere else there's like CV or something like that, or MIS-C for that, whatever it's called. And I've learned more about that in the past week. Nothing that I said last week was wrong, but I just wanted to update some things that I've learned. There was a new case report out of Italy where there's been more cases too. So we kind of talked about how there are a lot of cases in New York. Well, there's been other cases around the world as well. We just haven't known about them to the same extent, but there's been more released across the globe, and we've learned more about it. Still, bottom line, it is rare. It is scary, but it is rare. And so, what we're going to say is you keep doing what you're doing. You're wearing masks, you're social distancing, you're doing all the appropriate things. We will watch closely for this. There's nothing special to do differently. I don't think that knowing about these cases really changes what you should do on a day-to-day basis to keep your family safe and healthy. We'll watch for it. One thing we did learn is that in the majority of cases, it's several weeks after coronavirus. It's not like they get coronavirus, they have a fever, they're coughing and doing all the other normal stuff that you get with coronavirus. It's weeks later where then they develop fever again, and there's high fever and a lot of abdominal pain going on with it too. So I don't think that it's anything that needs to be on your radar. I don't think it's anything that needs to affect what you're doing right now. Hopefully you're social distancing. Hopefully you're wearing a mask when you're going out and about. But the other things that we're doing in life, the risks and balances that we're going to talk about more with Dr. Rauner, who is an epidemiologist and public health expert that's going to be on the show in just a bit here. I don't think that you need to do anything different because of that. Coronavirus has thrown us into this place where you like question everything. The other day I was one of the things, like I kind of try and do this keto-ish diet, but chocolate is like something that I have as a dessert and a reward, and it's low carb if you get dark chocolate. And I was eating this dark chocolate with orange. That's like our favorite to have as a little snack. I was like, I can't taste the orange anymore. I must have coronavirus. This must be the first symptom or my only symptom of coronavirus. I just have to have it. And I like played this mind game with myself for an hour. Should I get tested? What should I do? As it turns out, after about an hour, I looked back and realized, okay, the other day, usually I have my coffee in these open cups at home and at work. And the other day I had one in this like super fancy insulated coffee thing, and I burned my tongue. And that was why I had lost my sense of taste for dark chocolate with orange. But it just made me think about how that is something that everybody's going through and having these moments of like, I just sniffled while I was just outside and it's probably allergies, but what if it's coronavirus? And it's really just rocked our world. And that wasn't even like a thought or a worry or an anxiety that we were facing just a few months ago. And so that was just an instance of me just realizing what everybody else is going through too, which is questioning everything, questioning if it's okay to sneeze without feeling like you have to go into quarantine, or rub your nose or rub your eyes, or those sorts of things that we never even gave a second thought to before are now, or eating dark chocolate and not having it taste as strongly as it used to, which, as I said, just turned out to be the fact that I had burned my tongue. It's a really tough time. And so if you have a similar story or similar one and you want to share it in the comments, I think it's helpful for other people to see the worries or misplaced worries or fears that you're facing. And, you know, something that was a silver lining out of those. Okay, I realized that I didn't have coronavirus because I put it together, and that was a sense of relief when I realized the reason that I couldn't taste the dark chocolate as well. comment below. Maybe share an emoji of how you're feeling right now, because I think it's helpful for other people to see other people are stressed and worried about these things too. And it is scary, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown, but there's lots that we can do to help the mind games and also help protect us medically, emotionally, everything like that. There was one study that I wanted to share that kind of reinforces the need for social distancing. It was out of Colombia this week, and it was kind of disheartening to see the results. But basically, they looked back and they said, what would have happened if social distancing had started 1 week earlier? So if they had started social distancing in early March rather than in mid-March, and the number is shocking. As of today, we've had over 90,000 deaths in the United States from coronavirus. And if we had started social distancing 1 week earlier, there would have been about 36,000 fewer Americans' deaths. And if we had started 2 weeks earlier, if it had been in place, social distancing and those sort of guidelines had been in place on March 4th, 54,000 fewer deaths in Americans. And so that just puts into stark contrast for me how important social distancing is. Does it mean you can't go to the grocery store? No. Does it mean that you can't see close relatives? Does it mean you can't send your child to daycare? No, not necessarily. And I'm going to talk through that in just a moment with Dr. Rauner here. But if we can wear a mask, if we can social distance, and if we can count on the rest of our community to do that, what a difference that will make. If we had this in place 2 weeks earlier, just 14 days earlier, we're talking 54,000 people that would not have died from coronavirus. And so hopefully that strikes you as, well, there's more that we can do. And now that we know more, we can do more. And motivates you to keep up the good work that you're doing. I have seen so many people in masks. I have had such great feedback from my posts, even the ones where I said that people that that refuse to wear masks are selfish. Still stand by that. And I think that now is the time to really say, even if I get coronavirus and I expect that I would have a mild course because I'm healthy and young and my kids are healthy and young, I'm wearing a mask to protect those that are at higher risk. I'm wearing a mask to prevent the spread if I am asymptomatic and accidentally spreading it, because there are those opportunities, and that's where I wear a mask. It's not to just protect myself, it's more to protect everybody else in our community, because not everyone else is young and healthy. Some people are young and have chronic illnesses. Some people are elderly. Some people are elderly and have chronic illnesses, and we know that those are the ones that are having more severe disease, and those are the ones that we can protect by putting these measures into place. Now, I think it's helpful as we talk through this. There are things that I can control, and there are things that I cannot control. I can control if I wear a mask. I can control if I practice social distancing guidelines. I cannot control what my neighbors do. I cannot control what the state government chooses to do, or what other states or countries are doing. I can do things that help me, that help my family, and that help my fellow community members. And almost all of it is local. There are very few, if any, things that I can do that are going to impact what our federal government does or those in charge there. And it's very easy to get really disheartened when you see those things. But there are still things that you, as an individual, as a parent, as a father, as a daughter, as a son, as a wife, that you can do in those positions that matter and that make a difference. And this study shows that that's the case. If we social distance, it helps prevent deaths. If we social distance, it helps prevent those that are at higher risk from dying. And so I would urge you and plead with you to not give in to the temptation of, well, it's not making a difference, or why should I have to do it? This is trampling on my rights. Instead, look at it as an opportunity to help in the community, knowing that it's not perfect help and that it won't help and prevent everything, but it will help. Now, with all that said, I am really excited because I get to talk with Dr. Bob Rauner, and I'm going to introduce him and share what he knows. We are going to do a lightning round of all the parent questions that I've gotten, and so I hope that this is helpful for you. All right, everyone. I'm really excited today to talk to Dr. Bob Rauner. He is a family practice physician here in Lincoln. He wears a lot of different hats, and I will mess it up if I try to explain it. But I wanted to have him on to talk through some of the local issues that we're facing and really to do a lightning round of all the questions that I get asked that I kind of hem and haw on, and Bob might hem and haw on them as well. But at least I'll have another person hemming and hawing on them as well, and we can figure out what to do with all of these questions that parents are rightfully asking of us in the midst of coronavirus and all of the uncertainty. So, Dr. Rauner, could you just introduce yourself and then we'll get into the questions?
Okay, well, Bob Rauner, and I'm a family physician by background, and then got some more training in public health. So I walk a, I have an interesting set of jobs. I help run a health system with 22 clinics, and then I also, on a third of my time, run a nonprofit that does community health projects and work on CDC grants and breastfeeding and health disparities. And then I also spend a little time working on the school board, which obviously overlaps quite a bit and I think it's important because schools have a huge impact on health. And that's actually one of the problems with having schools closed. We're closing the schools to protect the health of the community, but it's actually potentially harming the kids. These are really tough decisions. So if you feel wishy-washy, so do the rest of us, even the smartest people. If you're not hemming and hawing, you probably don't know enough.
That's a really good point too. I feel like parents often want the answer. How many ounces does my baby need per day? When can I start solid foods? They want like the specific answer so that they don't have
Yeah.
that hemming and hawing. And it's tough for me to
Mhm.
not be able to provide that. And oftentimes it
Yeah.
comes down to really talking through what the context is for each parent,
Mhm.
family, and
Yeah.
doing a lot of values juggling and judgment
Mhm.
juggling to figure out this is the right answer for you. But
Mhm.
it's nice when we have different things that we can fall back on. So,
Mhm.
what is the local landscape looking like in Lincoln, in this corner of Nebraska right now with regards to
Mhm.
coronavirus?
Okay. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had a lot of spread in the community that started from the Smithfield meat processing facility in Crete. And then a lot of those people work in Lincoln, and they spread it to their family members when they came home, because we know home spread is where a lot of things happen. And so that resulted in, probably 200 to 300 cases at least of our rate we're getting. Testing we're seeing now, we're still getting around 200 to 300 cases per week. So it's still spreading around their community. It's not in overwhelming epidemic mode, so no need to panic. However, we're not in the clear yet either, so it's sort of a balance right now. And some of the newest stuff coming out, and actually the health department has a nice dashboard where they kind of say,
Hmm.
high, low, severe, kind of like the allergy forecast or the weather
Right.
forecast. And a lot of folks are pushing that as a way to understand, how do I act right now in my community? Because it's different in New York than it is in Montana, than it is here. And so you got to be careful watching national news. What does it look like here in Lincoln? That tells me what I should do here at Lincoln. And there's going to be a range of responses. It's not one response.
Well, and I think too, that dashboard, I really like that too, because it changes. Like
Mhm.
it can get lighter in terms of the numbers, and then it can get heavier too as local things change. And so you're totally right. Watching the national news or seeing how other countries have handled it and why aren't we doing what they did? Well, it's totally different circumstances. And so just like pretty much everything is local, and
Mhm.
what's going on in your community is really determining how you should be acting. So if we talk about Lincoln and the surrounding area, what are your thoughts in terms of reopening? I mean,
Mhm.
we never really closed down completely, but
Yeah.
what do you think that reopening should look like in the next 2 weeks?
Well, it should be phased, and it should be cautious based on what our numbers show. Right now we still have some data problems. It's taking anywhere from 1 to 3 days to get our results back. So we're always going to be a little behind. So you don't want to go rushing out too fast, but also, we need to get out. I mean, we're social creatures, and so you can't just hole up at home and be panicked. I mean, one of the best things for a young parent is to realize that if you and your children are relatively healthy, the chances of dying from coronavirus are infinitesimally small.
Right.
But it's different though. What about my mom, or for example, or my father-in-law? What about a coworker who has type 1 diabetes? So we have to worry about spreading it to them is the key. And so first, take your own pulse, relax a little bit. The vast majority of us will be fine. And I'm not as young as you, Phil. I mean, 50. I'm not that worried about me getting it, but I do have friends and coworkers and family members. I worry about me spreading it to them, which is the reason to wear a mask, for example. And so I think we can cautiously reopen, but we don't want to go rushing back to movie theaters and football games and a packed church though either, because that would put us right back to where we were, and put us into a New York situation potentially. So you need a balanced response. I think the also learning what we've already learned so far in the last couple of months. One is that basic wearing of a mask and hand washing might be enough even by itself, actually. But the other problem we have a lot of what I call mask denial out there. It's kind of like climate change denial, where I have a hard time understanding what the resistance is to a mask, because it's literally been reusable cloth masks have been used for over 100 years. It was the norm in surgery until we got the newer disposable ones. And as a kid watching MASH, that's what Hawkeye and Pierce were wearing, as reusable cloth masks. That was the norm. But there's these theories going around about masks somehow being harmful to your health, which are not true. And I can't even find it studied to even argue against about it. So it's sort of this unbased theory, but they've been around forever. So we can do basic precautions for us that would work in any setting.
Well, I think that's a really good message to hear again and again and again, is that masks and social distancing are probably the keys to, if you want to get back out and do the normal activities of life. If you can do those things, then it's much safer. And like you said, most of my audience is not going to die from coronavirus, even if and when you are exposed and get infected. The vast majority will probably be asymptomatic, and those that are sick will truck through it. But it's really us protecting the elderly, the immunocompromised, those with chronic health issues. That's why we're wearing the mask. It helps to prevent us from getting infected or from sharing it, so that we don't give it to those that are at higher risk for having more serious health outcomes or death from coronavirus. In terms of families, this summer, swimming pools. What do you think about swimming pools?
That's a hard one. I mean, the chlorine probably kills the virus as well. It just
Sure.
how close kids are. I think it's going to be partly based on essentially the weather map, just the same way. If we're in like the green they're calling the new normal, if we get down to that, then I think probably pools would be okay. But if we're in the red zone, probably maybe we shouldn't. And then they probably wouldn't get it spread as likely in the pool.
Right.
Kids run around, yelling, "Quick, Rod!" So when they're sitting around, sharing whatever snacks they have, that's probably when it could happen. However, outside is much safer than inside. So just the dispersal, because you're outside, the ultraviolet light from the sun, all those things will decrease the spread. So the more you're outside, the better. So I think I can see the pools opening this summer if we can lower spread. I could see that being a reasonable risk. But again, we have to sort of follow that dial, and it's just like the weather forecast. I like Tom Frieden's explanation is just like, do I wear my rain jacket or bring my umbrella? Depends what the weather looks like outside today. And we may have a weekly basis decide, is it safe this week to go out to the pools? But if we're not seeing any community spread and we go down to like 10 cases a week, yeah, then probably pools are fine. So I think it's going to be a balance. And I think one of the things that would help people the most is if we could see what are the rates, how's it looking, give me clear little guidelines based on this little thing. And then there are other states that have done that. So Utah, for example, already has a nice metric where you can go, okay, for children, here's what I do in these 4 different settings. And it's kind of,
right.
It makes it a little more clear. Of course, it's always going to be a little nuanced. And so I could see the pools opening this summer, for example.
Well, and I like what you said there too about the balanced risk. Like, there is a risk, but there is a public and community good to having swimming pools, to being outside, to being around other people. Like, we're balancing risks every day. Even before coronavirus, we were balancing risks. It's just the equation has changed a little bit, and so we have to respond in kind. What about kids going back to daycares? What should I, as a pediatrician, when parents ask me, can my kid go back to daycare? How should I respond to that, or what should that look like?
I would say that's one of the hardest things to answer, because you know how kids act. Trying to get a 3-year-old to wear a mask and not slobber and not touch
a non-starter,
the same stuff. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's again, it's a balance of risks. How many kids are in that daycare? The more people in the same room, the worse. So that's why they put, like, for example, a 10-person cap, because I tell people the R naught, or the infection spread rate, doesn't have to go to 0.0. It just has to go less than 1. And sometimes some basic things will be just enough to get us there. You probably remember from medical training, the old surgeon's adage, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. That you don't have, or I think my even 1-year-old partners who told me when I was a resident, he would tell moms, you don't have to be the perfect mother, just the good enough mother. I can't remember who it said that. You might remember it. And so I think that's where those things are, daycare. That's why is it 10? Is it 15? There's not a magic number there. It depends on, who who else is in that daycare and how risky they are. And
Sure.
I've actually gotten a lot of requests from people saying, well, should I open my daycare or not? And that's a really hard question. Depends on community spread, of course. What if not everybody's behaving? What if one person out there is going to big gatherings and concerts and bringing their kid? Well, then they just spread it to everybody else, basically. So it's
Right.
going to we're going to have to start trusting each other a little more for some of these things to work, actually. And that's hard for some of us Americans, especially really independent Nebraskans, to do.
That's
So,
totally true. It really depends on everybody else. Like if it's just a daycare with just your kid, then
yeah.
that's low risk. But you're relying on the other people to play by the same set of rules when you don't know if they are, which then leads to that uncertainty and worry. And it does require a lot more trust of your fellow man and families to make the right choices. And
Yeah.
I think you're totally right.
And it may be the health of the family. So if my
Hmm.
wife and I have no health problems, we are sending our kids to daycare. If they get it, bring it home, it's probably not a big deal for us. But if I am a type 1 diabetic or my wife is going through breast cancer treatment, it might be a completely story about whether I'd want my kid going to daycare. I mean, that might be one of the things we have to think about if when schools come back in session, August, September. I think we may have to have an option for kids to continue remote if they or their
Sure.
family members have health conditions. And so we may have to have more than one way to do things, which is hard for large systems to do, but that's one of the things we'll be talking about this summer.
Well, I think that's a really good point too. And that's the conversation that I've been having with parents about daycare in particular is, do you have risk factors for severe disease? Are you going to be around grandparents that have risk factors? Well, I think it'd be okay to return to daycare, but I don't think that you should see grandparents as frequently, or you should, distance from them, because what if your child picks it up at daycare and then the family goes through it? You'll be fine. You're at low risk. You'll be okay. But then we're going to have to kind of hamper down our activities outside of work and daycare so that we don't spread it outside of daycare in case we pick it up. And I think a lot of families have been on board and understand that, like, we have to make some concessions. We can't have perfect, but we can have better and decent.
Another example I had with my own family is my middle daughter has a serious boyfriend. They've been dating for 5 years, and said, well, if you're going to keep seeing Tommy, then, well, his dad's a police officer. He's going to be in high contact. We're essentially epidemiologically linked with his family. So if you're going to be with Tommy, then maybe we can't be with my father-in-law as much. And so we'll have to decide where those boundaries are. And she actually decided, we should be around our father-in-law. So she kind of distanced himself for a while. They would go on a bike rides together, but they wouldn't, be as close. And so I think those are we'll have to kind of think through those trade-offs. And again, those trade-offs will depend whether we're in the red, yellow, or green. In the green, we don't have to make so many trade-offs, but we're in red, we're going to start seeing, how do we limit that spread just in case?
Perfect. I think that's a really good way to kind of look at it and help parents decide for themselves how to balance those risks, trust their fellow community members. And as you said, and have said several different times, it's in flux. Things might change. The dial might get greener, the dial might get redder, and then we're going to adjust from there. So along the same lines, seeing grandparents, that's the other one that I get asked quite frequently is, can can grandparents see their newborn grandchild? Can we go visit grandparents? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, again, it's going to be a risk benefit ratio balancing, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, how we have to be cautious, of course. It requires us to do our best to minimize contact to grandma or grandpa. But the flip side is that for the elderly, sometimes social isolation can be just as dangerous as coronavirus too. And so you need a balance there. I think where some people say we should call it physical distancing, not social distancing, because we still need to be social. But my father-in-law, he's a smart guy. He can make that decision himself. If he thinks, for example, I'm willing to take the risk because I'd rather see my grandchildren, when he's 81. Well, that's his choice too. And so I think we have to think about it in those lines. We just have to make an informed choice. But again, we can make those choices. And so I don't think they should be imposed on everybody. But that's why, the reason I wear a mask is because then I'd be essentially imposing my choice on everybody else if I decide not to wear a mask. I just don't think that's right. So I wear a mask, not because I'm worried about getting coronavirus. I'm not that worried about it. I'm worried that when I walked into any convenience store, how do I know that clerk isn't a type 1 diabetic, or that his wife doesn't have breast cancer, or that he's not the caregiver for his father who's 80 and has heart failure. I don't know that. So I'm going to wear a mask because I just don't know. Whereas it's easier with our own families. We have a pretty good idea of how healthy or sick our grandparents are. And if they want to take that risk, that's partly their decision.
I think that's a great way to look at it too, and probably helps families a lot to say, okay, they really want to see their grandchildren. there's an understandable reason for that, and they can make those informed choices together, and everyone be on the same page, realizing that the risk isn't zero. It's not
Mhm.
100. If it's 100, then we shouldn't do it. But it's somewhere in between, and we're going to accept that risk and do everything we can to minimize the likelihood of transmitting it in that situation. Can you give us some thoughts on school? You mentioned it before, but any ideas on what school will look like this fall?
Yeah, it's going to be a range. We haven't started having those meetings yet, by the way, partly because we had so little data to even make a good decision. I think we're getting
Hmm.
better data. You're seeing what other schools in other countries are doing, so we have people sort of going ahead of us. So Japan and Germany are bringing their kids back to school because they had a wave faster than we. So they're ahead of us a little bit. So we can kind of watch how they do, what they do. I think we'll have to have essentially three speeds for school instead of just everybody does. Schools tend to be large bureaucracies, like to do everything the same. I think we're going to be forced to have potentially three different ways of having school. We could have a mostly open, where most people are back, but some people with health conditions might do remote because of their own health risks. I could see us, if we have another big wave again, we may have to send everybody back home again. We could have a middle range. There's an interesting proposal where you would do 4 days on, 10 days off, which fits the cycle of the virus. So if everybody came in for 4 days, by the end of that 4 days, some people might start getting something, might start spreading. Then the next 10 days, we'd all go home. And over those 10 days, people either have it or don't have it. If they don't have it, they come back again. And if they do have it, they stay home until they're not sick anymore. You might actually sort of be half there. So you'd be able to have about half as much curriculum time up front and the other half.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be? And I don't know if that's going to be a live option or not. I'm actually talking with an epidemiologist next week about that to say, is that a legitimate theory? It makes sense to me. Now, the other problem is it logistically feasible to do that in a large school district? I don't know.
Right.
It would also only work if all of them do it. So it wouldn't have to be just Lincoln Public Schools. You'd need the Catholic schools, the Lutheran schools, some employers. For that to work, you'd have to have the coordination across the community. And I'm not sure, can we get that amount of coordination across our community? I think we could. Now, will they is a whole nother story. So I think all those options are beyond the table. So we're going to have a lot of challenging meetings. I hand it to the school leadership because they're going to have to plan for three types of approaches in really rapid succession. Those curriculum folks have been working overdrive for 2 months now.
Oh my gosh.
For
No
them
kidding.
out.
Just totally out of the blue. And then,
Yeah,
hey, get everyone to keep learning, but
yeah,
you can't be in the classroom. You don't
oh
have
yeah.
printers available. Not everybody has a computer. Like, go.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I've got friends and relatives who are teachers. It's interesting hearing their talks, and sometimes they have really funny stories too about what the kids do, because kids are pretty unpredictable. They had a lockdown. You can't change your name because some high school kids are changing their names to not so nice things. They're
Yes.
teachers. What do you expect? So how do you work around all those things?
I saw one boy that put out a picture of him that was like, it was a picture that replaced it that just said connecting, and he was on the call the whole time with muted and everything because
Oh
everybody
yeah.
thought he was in the process of connecting. Yeah, there are plenty of great opportunities to make Zoom a fun way to goof off in
Yeah.
class as well. So.
Either good or bad ways.
Okay. I think that we've covered most of the questions I got. The other one was date night. That was one that my wife and I had is is it okay to get a babysitter to go out, and do a social distance date night? What's that look like?
Yeah, I think so. And so, I think I told you, my wife and I, for anniversary, we got takeout the Normandy, and we went to the park and sat on the picnic bench with our Normandy meals, and it was a nice little date night. So as long as you're outside, so it's like going to a restaurant. I'm still not okay with going inside the restaurant to eat.
Okay.
Look at some of those spreads when you're in an enclosed setting. I'm not ready for that yet. However, I'd sit outside. I think it's much safer, but doing pickup and going to the picnic, at the park is a great way to do it, I think. So I'd say,
That
yeah,
sounds very romantic.
some
I think
creative
that's
ways
a
to do
great
it.
idea. I'm glad I got the thumbs up from you.
Yeah.
Any other messages that you want to share with parents in the Lincoln and Nebraska area?
I'd say the biggest thing is just keep the balance. It's not doom and gloom. Most, 90, in the worst case scenario, 98% of us are still going to be fine. So, but we want to minimize for those other 1% to 2%. And then some people say, if we delay it, is that making any difference? I'd say, yeah, delaying it does make a huge difference. We have really good pulmonologists and critical care doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists, but they're going to be a lot better on treating case number 10 or 100 than on case number 1. So by delaying it, we're not delaying the inevitable. It's just that when it happens, we'll be much better prepared, and your odds will be much better. So instead of 2% of people dying, maybe only 0.5%. That's a big difference, actually. So I do think it is worth it to slow it down. It's not just, quote, delaying the inevitable.
Right. That's great advice. And I think the bottom lines for families that I've taken away too are balance the risks, wear a mask when you're out in public, social distance. And
Mhm.
then at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what does things look like locally? What is the
Mhm.
local forecast for this day, week, month? And then we're going to adjust accordingly.
Yep. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Rauner. I know that you have a YouTube channel that has gotten a lot of popularity. I was going to ask what the silver lining is in all of this, and I had forgotten, but I know that one of the silver linings for you is that you've gotten a much bigger following and voice on YouTube. So I will put in the show notes for this where people can find you on YouTube to keep in touch with your community updates, which have been so helpful for me to keep on top of what's going on in the community. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing on behalf of Lincolnites and Nebraskans to weather this crazy storm that came out of nowhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're welcome.
That was perfect. Okay, now I'm going to shift gears and I'm actually going to, because I have the power of technology, turn this into not a coronavirus checkup. There we go. Because coronavirus isn't everything, it's not the only thing, and there's plenty of other stuff that's going on. Now, I wanted to share, and I don't think I can post it here in the links. I might be able to add it after the fact, but I wrote a blog post this week on how to transition from the school year to summer, and that's something that has been really hard for a lot of parents. Like, what day was the last day of school? Oh, it was yesterday. Well, we should take some pictures today. A lot of people feel like kind of just the school year was ghosted out. And are they still grading assignments? When do we get our report cards? Is this summer? I think it's really helpful if you have a hard and fast, this was school year, this was summer. And I talk about in this blog post, and I know that the link is drb.show/summer. If you go to that website, you'll find the blog post, and it just lays out some ideas. I also talked about it on a recent podcast episode where I talk about some ideas on how to transition from the school year to summer so that it feels like there's some distinction. And even though tomorrow is also a day where we're going to be at home and together, that it's a little bit different than it was because now it's summer and yesterday it was school year. That helps that shift that mindset, and it helps to move from the place of what schooling at home looks like, what distance learning looks like, to the place of this is summer break, and this is how we're going to make it special. We talk in the blog post a lot about routines and keeping up with routines. I'm going to talk later about chores and how to get your kids to do chores. But I think it's important to transition so that it doesn't feel like there was no cap on the end of the school year. And what grade are you in now? Oh, yeah, wait, you were in that grade and now you're in this grade. Well, it's helpful for kids to have that transition too and to feel like, okay, this is summer now. So drb.show/summer is where to find that blog post that I did. Now, the other thing that I did this week that I wanted to share with y'all is I was listening to a podcast by a guy named Ray Edwards. And he's a person that I've learned a lot from about how to craft good stories and how to, communicate through these videos and scripts and everything that I do, because it can be hard to know like how to talk to people. But he also kind of has a lot of mindset things that he talks through. And one of them that he talked through this week on his podcast was about taking what you're feeling, taking what your worries are, and writing that down. And the way that he described it and what to do is to, as you start your day, think about what is on your mind. Think about what you're worried about or that you're, hung up on, and write that down, and then take that and write down the opposite, or write down what you envision it looking like. And I actually did this because I wanted to see how it worked. And I wanted to share with you what I wrote down and what the result was. And it helped, I will say. Writing down what I was thinking about, what I was worried about, what I was anxious about, and then writing down what I wanted to happen instead was helpful for the day. And I will share with you that it was our son's birthday. Walt's birthday was on Tuesday. And the plan had been for it to be a normal school day, and then coronavirus hit. And not only that, but it was field day, which he had been looking forward to all year because it fell on his birthday. And field day is like the day where they do all the outside games and activities and ice cream at school and a dunk tank and all of those things. And he was super bummed that there was not going to be a field day on his birthday this year. And so I took the day off work and we said, we're going to do a family field day. And the immediate thing is, well, that sounds like a lot of planning and a lot of work and a lot of activities, and that's not really the speed of our family in general. At least it's not the speed of my wife and I. And so we were thinking of like, how can we make this fun and a chance to connect as a family and not have it be overwhelming or everybody be upset or frustrated that it's not going as well as we had thought and hoped. So my thought that morning, and we kind of planned through like what the things would be for the day. We got Walt's buy-in. We asked him what his favorite things were from field day so that we could kind of emulate those or make those our own as a family. And then my thoughts for that morning, oftentimes, it's easy to get distracted. So one of my thoughts was, I'm going to be distracted today by all the different things: social media, emails, housework, chores, getting meals made, and all those things. So I'm going to be distracted. And my other thought was, I'm going to, or it's not going to go well, and it will end up with lots of bickering, fighting, tears, all those sorts of things. And so those were the two thoughts that I wrote down. And then I wrote down what I wanted to happen instead. And for the I am going to get distracted, I wrote, I'm going to be present at plenty of great moments today. That didn't mean that I'm not going to be distracted from time to time. That didn't mean that this might not creep out from time to time. But I'm going to be present at a lot of moments that are important today. And just write down and saying, okay, that's what's going to happen. Actually, I will tell you and show you pictures that made a difference. And then the other one, it was the other, negative thought was, this isn't going to go well. It's not going to live up to the expectations. And instead, I wrote down that we're going to be engaged, we're going to connect as a family, and it's going to be a lot of fun in the moments that we're together. Now, I'm going to show you pictures, and then I might have to move my head. Oh, there's all the pictures. So, here's the different things that we did to make it Family Field Day. First and foremost, we had very low expectations of the events. We weren't going to plan a whole day like school would and have a dunk tank. Walt was like, yeah, I love the dunk tank. I'm like, well, it's going to be like 70 degrees out, and we don't have a dunk tank. And we probably could rent one, but that would be ridiculous. And we'd have to fill it with a garden hose, and there would be a lot of things. I came up with the idea of a reverse dunk tank, which I didn't even actually plot out what that would look like. But it turned out to be kind of a chilly enough day that we didn't go with any water activities. So that was a saving grace. I don't know what a reverse dunk tank is. Everybody's stuck in the sprinklers until you get thrown a ball or something and you get to get out. I don't know. We hadn't gotten that far. But we did a few fun things. We got donuts because they love donuts. And so we had donuts on strings, and you couldn't use your hands, and you had to eat the donut. And it was a race because we have competitive children and they love to race and do these sorts of things. And so we had a race. So you can see here eating the donuts off the string. We had two different heats. Jane, our eldest, won the older kids and mom heat, and then Harry, who actually didn't want his donut on a string, he actually won the younger kids plus dad division. Gloria just ripped hers off the string and had a jolly time walking around the yard, eating her donut and smashing it in the dirt and grass, and then eating more of the donut. The other things that we did was a tug of war, as you can see up here in the right-hand corner. Now, I had asked Walt, what's your favorite thing from field day? And he said tug of war. And I was like, okay, well, we got to do tug of war. Well, the local hardware store that I drive by on the way to work, I called them, and they didn't have a good rope that wouldn't like burn up your hands or leave a bunch of splinters. And then I kind of just, didn't pull the Amazon card because I didn't plan enough to have a tug of war rope available. So this was one where it was a little bit on the spot, where we tied a bunch of bed sheets together, and it worked perfect. Like you can see here, a couple times we got started and the knots came undone. But a couple times, then we got it all down, and the knots were so tight that we accidentally, like, it took me 3 different tries to get the knots untied later on, because I kind of gave up with pliers and all sorts of different things to try and get the knots out, because we pulled really hard and the knots got tighter and tighter. But they loved it, and that was what Walt said was one of his favorite things from the day, was a bunch of sheets in the backyard doing tug of war. So it was not a trip to the zoo. It wasn't a trip to Disney World or the Children's Museum. It was tug of war in the backyard with bed sheets tied together. The other things we did, you can see down here, Walt, with those cups. This was a mystery sauce tasting. Literally, this was one of the highlights of the day. And it was me putting some sauces, some condiments from the fridge into cups, putting some little, I actually used plastic knives because we didn't have any tasting spoons or anything like that. It's like, try not to cut your mouth or your tongue as you taste these. And they tasted the sauces, and then they wrote down what their favorite sauces were. Or not what their favorite sauces were. They wrote down what they thought the sauce was, and they had a ball doing it. It took 5 minutes, but it was one of the highlights of the day, and it could not have been easier and less work to do. And then we had a birthday cake, and we sat on the patio, and we had a pizza party and a birthday cake, and Walt said that it was his best birthday ever, which was huge for me because I was going into it being like, okay, is he going to even like this? This is quite lame compared to previous birthdays, and I'll blame coronavirus that we can't do all the things that we could do or that make the special moments. But he said it was his favorite birthday, and so that was really great to hear, and it really reaffirmed for me this whole thing. I'm going to make these go away because I feel a little boxed in. Reaffirmed for me that you can make your moment special. You can show up at those moments. Did I post on social media? Did I check my email and respond to emails at some points in the day? Yes, I did, because I kind of like having that as a way to just check out and have a moment to myself. Like that fills my bucket up, not responding to random work emails and things like that, but doing those creative endeavors. And so I had those moments, but they were coupled with lots of moments of engaging and connecting and being present and putting the little bit of extra work into making the day special. And at the end of the day, everybody was happy. We didn't try and plan every moment. We probably did some field day event every hour to hour and a half. The kids had Zoom calls in between for their last days of school and last Zoom calls, and we took naps as a family. We groceries were delivered and all those sorts of things. So it was quite the normal day with a few really bright moments that made the day stand out and made it the best day ever. And so what I would encourage you to do, going back to all of this, is when you wake up in the morning, make it part of your routine. What are the thoughts or worries or anxieties that I'm having right now? And what if I wrote down the opposite of those, or what I envision happening instead? And then see how that plays out. And I think you'll see that it works quite well when you have said, this is what's going to happen. Then it makes it much easier for that to happen. It's not an accident that you show up or you engage or you be patient or those sorts of things. It's because you were intentional about it. And so that's kind of my mind thought thing for this week. Thinking about thinking. I don't do a lot of thinking about thinking, but that was one thing where I did. As we wrap up, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was chores. This summer, I hope your kids are helping. I hope that you're not doing it all yourselves. And if you are, stop. Your kids can help. And when I talk with kids in the exam room, like I will be in just a couple minutes, as my nurse messaged me saying, are you ready to get started? Getting help is really important. Not only because you shouldn't have to do it all, but because your kids can actually help and make positive contributions to your family. I ask kids all the time, what do you do around the house to help? And they're often my activities, meaning I clean my room, I make my bed, I brush my teeth. Those are the sorts of things that I usually hear. And I say, okay, those are great and those are important to take care of yourself, but I want you to start doing something to help out your family, something that helps not just me, but also the rest of my family to have more time to spend together. And when I frame it like that, kids are usually able to come up with a thing or two. And then I usually kind of build on that and I say, that is a great idea. I bet you could feed the dog and that would help your mom and dad and your brothers and sisters to not have to do as much work. What else could you do? And sometimes, I actually made this chore chart that parents can download, and it has ideas for different chores. So if your kids do not have a chore chart, if they do not have a plan for summer, what they're going to do, go to this link, drb.show/chores, and you can download that chore chart, and it's got lots of age-appropriate ideas. In our house, our 10-year-old picks up the poop in the backyard. Our 9-year-old empties the dishwasher. Our 10-year-old washes the dishes. Those are things that my wife and I do not do anymore. We let the dishes pile up and our 10-year-old does them. The dishwasher is full until our 9-year-old opens it. Our 4-year-old is in charge of filling the food and water bowls for the dog. And even if we're playing outside, even if we're watching a show, we got to get those things done. So, that's Dorothy's job. Let's go find Dorothy. She's got to do her job. And if you show your kids that you rely on them for the family to function at the best, they will embrace that and realize the positive contribution. You do have to talk it up a little bit and say, hey, remember how Jane helped with the dishes so that we could get ready to go on our walk. Now we're able to have more time as a family because mom and dad aren't doing all that work. You can frame that in a lot of different ways for your kids, and they'll see the value. And then you can make those moments special and acknowledge that it's special and we have this moment because everybody works together. So if you go to drb.show/chores, you can find the chore chart. Get your kids helping. You're leaving a lot on the table if you're the one that's clearing the table and doing the dishes and sweeping the floors and picking up the poop and washing all the laundry and folding all the laundry. Those are things that your kids can help with. And then you can not only get help in those moments, but you'll reclaim your evenings. You'll reclaim downtime where you're not just keeping up all the time, because you can sit down and relax because you know that your kids are going to help. And that makes all the difference. I hope this has been a helpful episode. I would love it if you would share it. I would love it if you would comment below with what you think I should call this Week in Parenting. Coffee with Phil, Coffee with Dr. B. If you can come up with the best name, I will send the name that we choose. We'll probably, take the best. We'll do a poll, and then if I like what you came up with and what the poll results were, whoever does that, $25 Amazon gift card. I have a bunch of gift cards, and I will give you a $25 gift card for coming up with the best name. So comment below with what you think it should be, and if it gets chosen, we will find you and we will get you your gift card. Keep up the good work. Take it easy this weekend. Have time as a family. Have time to connect. And like Dr. Rauner and I said, there's a balance. There's always a balance in everything that we do. And this is just a weird time where the balance has been shifted. But how we step up and how we respond can really make the difference for our family, for our children, and for our community. So please, please, please keep up the good work.